Good morning and welcome. I'm Sandy. I'm here today to share with you an overview of the eight limbs of yoga. Yoga is obviously a transformative practice when you really commit yourself to it. And just the physical benefits alone are overwhelming, but there's still a lot more that's there. So, outside of the poses, prior to about 500 or 600 years ago, the yoga practice consisted basically of a seated pose, like you see in the picture, with an individual using mental exercises and meditation. So, it's a way of training the body, the breath, the attention, and making our daily choices with more awareness. So, what is yoga? The word yoga comes from the word yoke. Think of a yoke of oxen, right? It brings together. And what is it bringing together? It's bringing together universal consciousness, which some may choose to call God, and the individual consciousness. In yoga, we call the universal consciousness Brahman, and we call the individual consciousness Atman. In everyday language, yoga is the practice of noticing what's happening in our mind and our body before we let it automatically run our life. So, this doesn't mean that we're not having the thoughts we always have, but it means choosing reaction rather than just automatically reacting to every thought, emotion, or sensation that appears. In the box, you see the Sanskrit yoga's chitta vritti nirodha, and there's some different interpretations, like different ways of saying the same interpretation for that. Here it says yoga is the learning to steady the mind. It's also been expressed as yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. And who am I, right? Who am I when I am separated from my thoughts? So, just something to consider in this context. So, the eight limbs of yoga as one path. The eight limbs are first the yamas. That's how we treat others. Second is the niyamas. That's how we care for ourselves. Three is asana, and the asana is the pose. That's what most people are familiar with, using the body to practice awareness. Pranayama really is linked to the asana because we also use the breath to steady the mind and continue to practice awareness in the body. Then the fifth limb is pratyahara, and that is inward focus. So that's just the practice of drawing our attention inward so that we don't have as many distractions. Dharana is concentration, and that is the practice of maintaining our focus on one thing for a period of time. And if we maintain that concentration long enough, then it turns into the seventh limb, which is dhyana, meditation, attention becoming steady, right? An extended period of focus on one thing. And then samadhi is translated as bliss. Um, Enlightenment, connection to the whole. So we would call that integration in the yoga room. Integration meaning can be defined as I am content with the conditions as they are, and I don't need for anything to be any different. So the eight limbs of yoga help us move from reaction to awareness. All right. So the yamas and the niyamas are the foundation. The yamas are how we treat others, and we're looking at them in English only here. So the first yama here it says non-harming. We also call that non-violence. The second is honesty, which is truthfulness. The third one is non-stealing. The fourth one is non-hoarding, so not taking more than we need, not being concerned that we won't have enough. And then the fifth one is non attachment, loosening our grip. And yoga and Buddhism both say that attachment is the source of all suffering. So we can relieve our suffering to the extent that we can let go of our attachment to things being the way that we think they should be rather than as they actually are. Then you have the second limb, which is the niyamas. And the first niyama is purity. So that's purity is like cleanliness, caring for your body, maintaining your environment, but it also is considered what you consume in terms of food, media, etc. Then you have contentment. The third niyama is discipline. And a lot of times that is translated as tapas is the Sanskrit for that. And tapas translates to fire. So we step into the fire and we put ourselves in that non-negotiable pose on the mat to increase our discipline. And the fire is what transforms. So just like you would heat up a piece of iron if you wanted to form it into something new, discipline is the equivalent of that in daily life. Then there's self-study. So we're continually monitoring ourselves, studying ourselves, being aware of our reactions, journaling daily. And then finally, surrender is the fifth niyama. So letting go of that which we can't control. So a reflection here asks, are my choices creating more peace or more suffering? My choices and where I choose to place my awareness. All right, so this slide talks about the posture is steady and easeful. The point is not to perform the perfect pose in asana, the third limb. The purpose of the pose gives us a safe place to watch ourselves. So we purposely put ourselves in positions that bring up discomfort, and then we observe ourselves to see how we react. Do I force it? Do I collapse? Hold my breath? Do I leave the room? Do I compare, judge myself, or give up too quickly? However we react to difficult conditions on the mat tends to be a mirror to how we react in everyday life. So studying ourselves in pose really helps to reveal and help us learn about ourselves and how we live in everyday life. So the reflection from this slide, the mat is the low pressure training ground for real life. So it's low stakes, right? If we disintegrate, as we call it, right? If we can't keep ourselves steady and we disintegrate, it's just a pose. So, if we lay down or we end up going in the bathroom and bird bathing because we're so hot, those are ways of escaping those difficult conditions. And in our practice, we try to keep the conditions such that they put us on our edge. Let's see, I think we might have something about that in the next slide. So the edge is the place where the practice gets real. It's the place where the tendency to resist overlaps with the ability to relax. So we're in discomfort, right? We're finding the pose somewhat difficult and uncomfortable, but not to the extent that we can't stay there and steady ourselves by using our breath. So if we're not yet at our edge, we haven't pushed ourselves enough to the point where we're actually going to see growth. If we are beyond our edge, the breath will really reveal that. So the breath becomes choppy. We start mouth breathing, right? So that's a place where there's too much force, pain, or struggle or fear. Then we would need to back out a little bit. And then if we're practicing at our edge, we can stay there. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but we can continue because we've learned to use our breath as a tool and steady our mind in that discomfort. So, can I feel what I feel without it dictating to me what I am going to do next? Right? We want to respond and not react. All right, that brings us to the fourth limb, pranayama. Now, the 5 circles that you see at the top really are a bit of a reflection of what in yoga we call the koshas, which are sheaths, which simply put are layers of the self. So the body is the most dense part of ourselves, but there's more than just the physical body. There is the breath. So the breath is pranayama, and we use the breath as a bridge to connect our physical body to our energy body. And what the energy body, as denoted by this part of the diagram, The energy body is like the part of the mind that it can keeps everything in balance. The energy body keeps everything, like it does all the things that you don't have to think about. So, in terms of digesting your food, beating your heart, sometimes we call this the intelligent body, but the breath really is the bridge between the energy body, the mind, and the physical body. So if we can manage our breath, that was a very roundabout way to say, if we can manage our breath, then we can manage our mind by using the breath as that bridge. So breath is partly automatic and partly voluntary. It makes it a really powerful way to control your attention, to manage your mind, and, retain as much energy as possible. Okay. Pratyahara, this is the fifth limb. So, inward focus or turning our attention inward. Pratyahara is often called withdrawing from the senses. And it doesn't mean blocking things out, but it's basically helping us to remove distractions that activate our senses. So everything we hear, feel, see, or think, it smells, right? That's a sense. That also can draw your attention outward. So when we're in Pratyahara, this is the way that it was described to me. Think of something that's very distracting and consider that it is presented to you in a movie theater on the big screen with the volume up as loud as it will go, and you're sitting in the front row. Okay, so that might be the experience if we are not able to turn our attention inward and we just get led around through our daily life by these big distractions when they happen. Now, take that and take it off the big screen, put it on a TV screen in the living room, and you're standing on the other side of the living room. It's there, you're hearing it, but it's not as distracting because it's smaller, so to speak. Then consider that same movie playing on a TV in a bedroom down the hall with the door closed. So when we are able to effectively turn our attention inward and withdraw from the senses, we remove distractions by turning our focus towards something inward, and usually that will be the breath. So here it says the sound is still present, but we don't have to chase it, right? We can choose to let it be without it guiding us around by the nose. So can I notice what is happening in front of me without automatically reacting to it, but instead choose my response to it? All right, and that brings us to the sixth and seventh limb. A lot of times these two are coupled together because concentration is just a shorter version of meditation, and meditation is a more focused and longer extended period of concentration. So they do really work well together. So, meditation is not failure free concentration, it's the result of practice. Okay. So, dharana is placing attention. We call it concentration. Pick a focal point. So, if you practice hot yoga and you've ever used a yogi toes towel, you notice that the yogi toes towel all have that dot, that large dot at the top center of the mat. The purpose of that dot is for you to focus your eyes on it. It gives you something to focus on. A lot of times I'll focus on that dot in the mirror rather than, tilting my gaze downward a little bit. So you pick a focal point. It could be anything, though, a breath, a mantra, a sensation, the flame of a candle, anything. So every time the mind wanders, you notice, as soon as you notice it's doing that, you bring it back to your focal point. The longer you can hold your attention on that focal point, now it gradually becomes meditation because there are fewer interruptions from distraction. So the returning becomes less effortful, right? It becomes easier. Attention begins to flow, and then meditation emerges naturally out of that without being forced. So meditation is something that we can go in and out of on a daily basis. We can also go in and out of concentration. And I think that it's important to mention that these 8 limbs aren't like a ladder. You do this one, then you do that one. It's something we practice them all at once and it flows. We flow in and out of those things, right? Take nonviolence, for example. Well, if we're practicing on our mat and maybe we are judging ourselves unkindly because we can't do what we normally do and we've put in that expectation, that's a form of violence that toward ourselves. So the less frequently we do that as a distraction, you're moving more and more toward concentration and then eventually again into meditation. So that's just an example. Did I miss a slide here? Okay, so Darna and Diana are both training attention and they are considered also Dharna is considered a mental practice, and dhyana, and then samadhi. I don't have a slide on samadhi. Samadhi is bliss, integration. When you experience meditation long enough, you will start to enter samadhi, which we call integration. And that is a state of mind where you are completely integrated with the moment as it is, and your mind is not focused on anything past or future, and it is not wishing for things to be any different than they are. Um, it's interesting to mention also, and I'm talking about samadhi, which is the 8th limb on this slide, since it isn't in the next slide, that when you do yoga nidra, so if you've practiced yoga nidra with us at the studio and you move into that state of integration, there's breath that is voluntary and there's breath that is involuntary. And a lot of people that I've talked to that practice yoga nidra regularly, they express that there's times when they're deep into the yoga nidra meditation that they almost feel like their breathing is stopping. And the reason for that is because because you are in that meditative state, the autonomic nervous system has taken over breathing. So the breathing is happening involuntarily, same way it would when you sleep, but you're awake. So it feels really weird. If you haven't had the opportunity to practice any yoga nidras with us, I would encourage you to do that. I'll try to bring something out in a recording also, so that if you are not local to the studio, you still get a chance to try it. All right. So this slide talks about the chakra system and the spine. So the subtle body model, chakras are energy centers organized along the central axis on the up and down the spine. So this is not really presented as anatomy. It's more of an energy concept. It's a map for understanding how our energy, emotion, attention, and awareness are experienced in the body. So this is kind of reversed. It usually the root is at the bottom because the base of the spine is the root chakra and it provides grounding, survival, those sort of things. So the energy center at the base of the spine is the root chakra. Then you have the sacral chakra is right around right is below the navel, sort of in the lower pelvic area, and that deals with creativity and relationships. The solar plexus, which is right around the belly button, like directly under the belly button, deals with power. That's our power center, our will and confidence. The heart center is related to love and compassion. So we think of in yoga and in subtle energy, we think of the heart center sort of as the switching station between living from the lower chakras and the higher chakras. So when the heart opens, then we are able to access those energy centers that are above it. The throat chakra follows the heart chakra. So that deals with expression and voice and being heard. If we are unable to open the heart center, then likely the throat chakra will have some blocks and we're not able to express ourselves the way that we truly feel. Then you have the third eye, which is the spot between the eyebrows, and that is considered the center of inner seeing, intuition, awareness. The third eye helps us to integrate everything from the centers below. And then the crown chakra is considered the highest place of awareness, unity, and integration. Again, integration. All right. And here we have, this is a little bit more on, we're continuing with the concept of the chakras, right? So the spine is the central chakra, and we call that the Sushumna. Then there's two main chakras, or pardon me, two main nerve channels that go side by side with the spine. The Ida is considered the feminine side. It's cooling, receptive, inward moving energy. We consider that feminine. Then the Pingala Nadi is the male dominated nadi, which is an energy channel. It's warming, active, and outward moving. So the Sushumna being the central channel goes right in between those and they crisscross. Every location that the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna crisscross represent one of those seven chakras that we looked at in the last slide. So the teaching is that when our opposites come into balance, our masculine and feminine are balanced, our Ida and Pingala nadis are balanced, effort and surrender are balanced, action and stillness, right? We're looking at the concept of polarity. Everything exists as opposites, but we really, to maintain our best energy, we need to bring those opposites into balance. So energy isn't pulled into one side or the other. It becomes available for awakening through that central channel if it's balanced. If it's not balanced, then we tend to have an imbalance toward the masculine where we want to force things to happen. We want to, perform more action to make it happen. We need to use our will more. All of those are masculine aspects. Whereas the feminine aspects, the cooling, the receptive, another example that's really good for the masculine and the feminine, think of the hot yoga practice as the masculine. It's very forceful, right? It's very willful. And then think of yoga nidra, where all you're doing is lying down on your back and following the guidance of the instructor, moving through very it's no activity. You're laying down on your back. There's no heat, right? That would be more of a feminine way of moving to the same destination, which is quieting the fluctuations of the mind. Sun and moon are the most relatable, I think, and day and night, right? Male aspect being Pingala, uh, that would be sun or day, and then the female, the more calming and receptive, would be the Ida Nadi, and that would relate to the moon and to night. We bring those opposites in a lot. Then we have Shakti and Kundalini. So this really gets a little bit more into yoga concepts that are a little abstract, but this is just an introduction, so it's all good. So Shakti means living power and creative energy. Shakti is that energy that the yogis teach lays coiled at the base of the spine. And then Kundalini is this potential energy described, pardon me, Kundalini is the energy described as resting at the base of the spine and then rising up when the inner conditions are ready. So the reason why we're bringing balance between the masculine and the feminine parts of the body is so that we can have that balance so that the energy is most free to move up past the heart chakra, provided it's open. If the heart chakra is open, then it moves to the throat chakra. You're able to articulate the truth and express yourself more clearly and more simply. Then it moves to the third eye. Your intuition and your creativity improve. Then it moves to the crown chakra, where everything is in a dynamic integration and functioning optimally. Another really good way of describing the two nadis, the masculine and the feminine, is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight part of the nervous system. We need to balance that out with the rest and digest, the sympathetic rather nervous system. So most of us, if left to our own devices, we really have an overexpression of the masculine, right? It's do, do, do. We're always on the go. We feel like if we're resting, we're not doing anything. We're not producing. We're not accomplishing things. And that's really not a good, obviously, it keeps us out of balance. But that rest and digest is, I think it's important to clarify that's not watching TV or watching videos or scrolling on your phone. The rest and digest is really allowing space in your mind for the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you do yoga nidra, you are actually training your parasympathetic nervous system to more efficiently rest and digest. And then that moves us towards better balance with the male dominated side of the nervous system or the sympathetic. Okay, so Shaktipat, that's a really wooey word that we get from traditional yoga, the authentic yoga, and it is the awakening or transmission of spiritual energy. So the goal is not a dramatic sensation, but rather a transformation of consciousness. It's something very subtle, and it's one of those things that if it happens, it's happening because the conditions are right for it, and you are fully integrated in balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And if you experience it and then you come back and try to make it happen again, just trying to make it happen will make it not happen. So it's one of those things that can be experienced from time to time. I'll share a personal experience when Ed came back from yoga teacher training from his Bikram training, and we were doing the full Bikram sequence every day here in our home yoga studio. Every day doing that practice brought me to a point where there was one class that I did where when we did the Kapalabhati blowing at the end of class and the class was complete, I did not remember doing the class. I was in integration the entire time. So that serves as an example to demonstrate what integration really is. And a lot of times in Yoga Nidra, you lose time. You go in, you remember laying down and following the initial instructions and the breathing, and then the next thing you know, the instructor says the practice is complete. That is integration. Okay. Samadhi. There we go. It's on this slide. So this is the eighth, or pardon me. Yes, the eighth limb. Samadhi is the deep absorption that comes when the usual feeling of me over here and the world over there, like I'm here and you're there, begins to soften. Ordinary experiences are like I'm here and you're over there. There's that sense of separation, and that's why yoga is union, because the sense of separation is an illusion. In samadhi, the separation softens. The experience feels whole, unified, and undivided. So this doesn't have to mean one dramatic event. At its deepest level, it points to direct experience beyond the usual ego-centered way of seeing life. And again, I think the simplest way to describe that is basically you're just not aware of the time. You're not wishing for things to be different. The mind is quiet. It almost seems like sleeping, but it's not sleeping because you're still aware. It just seems like sleeping because the mind is quiet. All right, two languages for the same movement. This is a little bit more than I wanted to go into in this particular video, but I'll go through it quickly just because it's here. So Patanjali's classical yoga is the yoga that is the broad, that is the original, steadying the mind, seeing the thoughts without becoming them, resting as the witness, and freedom from unconscious identification. That is the broad picture. The tantric and kundalini language, the shakti, the chakras, the nadis, that all comes from hatha yoga, which is our lineage. And then the Bikram yoga is a type of hatha yoga. The Amrit method is a type of hatha yoga. The Bhakti yoga studio provides hatha yoga classes. So hatha yoga basically is physical yoga. Um, the Kundalini language, Shakti, chakras, nadis, we talked about all of those. Kundalini rising through the central channel, union of Shakti, which is energy, and Shiva, which is consciousness. That divine union is considered the ultimate of the eight limbs of yoga in integration and awakening through transmission. So both are pointing toward a more conscious and less divided way of living. Okay. And in our everyday life, this can help us learn to move from reaction to conscious response. So rather than being swept away by what's going on around me, I pause and I can see it clearly because I'm more quiet in my mind. Instead of an automatic reaction, I choose a conscious choice. Instead of my attention being scattered and wasting my energy, I have a steady presence and I contain my energy. Instead of being lost and carried away by my thoughts, I am observing my thoughts as a witness. And instead of feeling separate from everything around me, I begin to experience that integrative connection with everything around me. So, yoga is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming more aware and more awake. And then this will be our last slide. A lot of Sanskrit on here. So again, Chitta Vritti Nirodha is Sanskrit for yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. All right. And then once we do that, the awareness rests in its true nature. So the Chitta saying, this one comes from the second Yoga Sutra, and then this comes from the third Yoga Sutra. When the mind is steady, then we rest in as our true nature, right? We then exist as our true selves. The eight limbs show us a path, and again, we move through that path every day. It's not like you do one, then you do two, then you do three. It's not like that. The yoga mat, the practice of yoga, is the laboratory where we observe ourselves, we study our body, our breath, and then we carry that into our daily life and try to bring those same practices there. And the light awareness is what sees, steadies, and integrates the whole of your journey here on this plane. The practice is the journey from reacting to life toward experiencing the deeper awareness that has become present all along. So that concludes this video on an introduction into the eight limbs of yoga. I hope you enjoyed it. Namaste.